Good morning, students, for Educational Foundations. The purpose of this session is basically to orientate you about the importance of the assignment and also, most importantly, the exams that is coming up for 2019 examinations. Yeah, I want to tell you that setting of the completion of the assignment is very, very important, just as equally is the studying of the exams, because we all know if you don't study, you don't pass. Without studying, you can forget. And I'm sure you know about other students also who didn't study, then obviously they fail. So don't do that. You must study. So, as I said, first, before I say the structure of the exams, you are given an assignment, and the assignment, the purpose of the assignment is also to prepare you for the exams, because you would interact with the study material. Ask you a question, you must answer that question. So it helps you prepare you. So by the time the exams comes, the information is already in your head. So you would know that. So it becomes just like a revision that you should do. So that's why it's very important that you complete the assignment, because it's like a preparation for the exams, as I said. Now let me go to the structure of the exam paper. Ladies and gentlemen, the exam paper assesses three elements. One, it assesses basic knowledge and comprehension, and that counts 70% of the exam. The exam, there's three exam papers. One is in April, one in August, and one in November. All three of them is 120, 120, 120. So, yeah, that's it. So, the first thing is, so the exam paper comprises of three elements or three components. It assesses basic knowledge and comprehension, which is 70% of the paper, 84 marks. And then it assesses higher level of understanding, where you must apply information and analyze information, which is 20% of the mark, which equals to 24 marks. And then the last part is very high level of understanding, critical analysis, which is only 10% of the mark, which is 12 marks. So if you add 84 plus 24 plus 12, you get 120. And if you add 70% plus 20%, 10%, that is 100%. So let me talk more about that. So before I go into the content, let me just give you a tip. You see, like I said, the basic questions, basic knowledge 70%, high level 20%, and very high level 10%. So I'm saying, if I can give you a tip, you must spend most of your time and effort when you study on the basic knowledge and comprehension questions, given the fact that that is 70%. So if you are there, if you do well there, 70% out of the remaining 30%, then you have done well. But if you don't study, like I was saying in the beginning, if you don't study and you don't do well on the 70%, then obviously, even you do well on the 30%, then you will not make it. So that's why I'm saying it's very important that you must concentrate and work hard on the 70%, the basic knowledge questions. I would also advise you should then pay lesser attention to the high level understanding and application questions, which is 20%, and even less understanding on the critical analysis question, which is 10%. So I'm not saying you should not look at it. I'm just saying focus, your 70% of your focus should be on the 70% questions are basic knowledge questions, because you know, if you are doing there, if you do good there, then basically you are nearly there. Basically, you can say you have passed it. So you must work hard there. Now let's go into the content of the three components: basic, higher level, and very higher level. Basic knowledge and comprehension. Here, the emphasis is on the following things. You see, there is a lot of bullet points there. What is the importance of comparative education and history of education? Can you give some examples? For example, if I say you need to compare. Now basically, to compare, you would say, for example, you compare the education system of Namibia with, let's say, for example, that of South Africa. In your study guide, you will find some information about that. So focus also on the comparative education things, where basically comparative education is you compare the education system of this country with the education system of another country. For example, you see us, we have IGCSE, National Senior Certificate, and for example, South Africa has a different one. Check your study guide, it's very important. That's one point. And then the second point is for example, when you look at, for example, history of education. History of education. Now, the history of education, if I can just give you an example, history basically means the past. It's the past. In other words, how was the education system in the past of, for example, Namibia? That kind of thing. History of education. How was the history of education in a particular country? And I was just saying, for example, the history of education in our country, Namibia. Yeah, so that's important. And then the second point that I would like to highlight is that you need to understand concepts such as a missionary, what is colonialism, its effect on society, development, and you should give examples of that. You know, for example, like now I just spoke about the history of education. Now, in the past, the missionaries has played a big role in educating people. If you also read your study guide, you would also see that. But it was more Christian education. That's what the missionaries were doing. So they educated people to become Christians, and we know the African values were different. We didn't believe in Christianity. So that was, for example, what the missionaries were doing. I think everybody knows what is colonialism. Namibia was colonized by the Germans, and then South Africa, and then we got independence in 1990. So you should not have problems with those kind of questions. And what was the effects of those kind of things? And then your study guide talks about sources of information. You need to distinguish between what is primary sources and what is secondary sources. And what are the differences between them? And also, you remember I said you need to give examples of this kind of things. The other point is violation of educational rights. Basically, this point basically means the right of children is violated not to go to school. Children are not in school for various reasons, are not in school for various reasons. Yeah. So That's basically what we mean when we talk about violation of educational rights. So the child is not in school. And then, ladies and gentlemen, the other point is educational goals. In Namibia, after 1990, the government has come up with new educational goals. Remember, I said earlier, there was apartheid education, part of the history of education. But then the government came in 1990, set new goals, and you need to know those 4 goals, for example. I'm not going to mention them. If you read your notes, you will know there are 4. You need to study. You will not pass if you don't engage your study guide. It's very important. So we are still under the basic knowledge questions. The next point that I want to emphasize is financing of ICT in schools. When we talk about financing of ITC in schools, what do we mean? Obviously, the point that comes to mind when you talk about ICT, all of us know about it's computers. It's computers. Does the schools have internet? And so on. You know, these days the internet is very important for education. Children can Google information. Yeah, so it's very important. Many of you are sitting in the rural areas, and you know, in the rural areas there's not even electricity. In some schools there's no electricity. So it becomes a problem. So what we mean when we talk about ICT in schools, you must know it refers to issues like computers and so on. And then the other point is homeschooling. Homeschooling is basically the name suggests or tells us is that the children are schooled at home and not going to a school like your normal school. The parents are basically educating the children at home. So what are the advantages of that and what are the disadvantages of that? I can give you one advantage. If a child is being bullied at school and the child does not want to go to school, no, mama, no, tate, I don't want to go to school because Samuel is bullying me. That is advantage of homeschooling. The disadvantage can be that child does not socialize a lot. So also read your notes around that. And then you have issues like, that is in your notes, ETSEP and NIET. Many of you maybe stays in Windhoek, other places, you come pass by Okahanja, you see NIET is there, National Institute of Educational Development. What is their role? So when you pass by Okahanja, you drive out of Okahanja on your way to the north, Ochivarongo, you would see that place there, NIET. So what is their role? Your notes tells you what is their role. What is ETSEP? Educational Teaching Improvement Program, Education Sector Improvement Program. Your notes also tells you what was the objective of ETSEP. And the other point is when we talk about educational rights, what is meant with that? Basically, the right to attend school, right to attend school. I'm giving you one. The right to attend school. The Constitution says also every child between the ages of 6 and 16 has the right to attend school. So, and that's why you see now the government, the last few years, has even said primary education is free because the Constitution says primary education shall be compulsory for children between the ages of 6 and 16, and that's why free and compulsory. And that's why it's becoming free. People are no more paying. And then the next point Let me just drink a bit of water. And the next point is minimum age convention. What is meant with that? Minimum age convention. Your book tells you what is the minimum age convention. Explain. Children under certain age is not supposed to work, and so on. And then the next point is also very important. The philosophies of this particular gentleman. There's a lot of philosophies. These guys had their own philosophies of education. For example, Plato, Julius Nyerere, Jomo Kenyatta, Paul Quintus, etc. So you need to know, please know what these particular learned people, philosophers of education, will say. I'll give you one example. One of them talks about Harambe, that we are now talking about. Other one talks about Ujamaa. So you need to know these kind of things, because it will be either in the April paper, or the August paper, or the last paper in November. And then, ladies and gentlemen, the next point is what you also should know is inclusive education and the structure of education. Now, inclusive education, if I can just give an explanation, basically means children with special needs are integrated. Integrated basically means you put them in one class. Are integrated into, children with special needs are integrated into the normal conventional classroom situation. Conventional classroom situation. I can give you an example. For example, you can put a child maybe who's deaf and blind into a normal school situation. So that is into a normal school. So that is inclusive education, where you integrate, you put them together. Children without any special needs, who's not deaf, who's not blind, you put them together with children with special needs into one normal classroom. So that is meant with inclusive education. What is meant with the structure of the education system? The structure of education system in Namibia, you guys are doing pre-primary courses, so you will go and teach in a pre-primary, and then you have lower primary, and then you have upper primary, and then you have junior secondary, and then you have senior secondary. So that is meant what is structure of education. Let me just explain. Like I said, the structure of education you have pre-primary, which is the course that you guys are doing, pre-primary education, and then you have lower primary education, and then you have lower primary education, then you have senior primary education, and then you have junior secondary education, and then you have senior secondary education. What I want you to do when you read your notes, I want you to attach which grades comes into play here. Give the particular grades as part of your reading, as part of your reading for the exams. For example, which grade is lower primary? Is grade 1 up to what? And which grades are senior primary? And which grades are junior secondary? And which grades are senior secondary? I cannot tell you everything. You must also do your own reading. Right. Now let's continue. The next point that I would like to emphasize is children's rights in the context of teaching and learning and the violation of it. What is the right of the child in the classroom? I can give you one. For example, now children, no corporal punishment. No corporal punishment. No teacher has the right to beat the child. So the right of the child is to be taught in a caring environment. To be taught in a loving and caring environment. Classroom environment. That is the right of the child. So you as a teacher, prospective teacher, you cannot come and insult the children, and then you see the children, especially those pre-primary children, children are crying. That stage, they are still young. They are 6 years old. So that is the right of the child that the teacher must not abuse the child. You must love the child. You must teach him or her in a caring environment. That is the rights of the child in a teaching context. And the violation of same is when you don't do that. For example, you beat the child, like I wrote here, corporal punishment. You beat the child, you can be in trouble. You can be disciplined, you can even lose your job. So you are not supposed to violate the right of the child, because the child has the right to be taught in a free, loving, caring environment. And that's your responsibility as the teacher. Because the next point talks about teachers' rights and responsibilities. Now, the one responsibility of you as the teacher, I will just use the same point that I made now. I will draw a line like that, and I said, it's your responsibility not to beat the child. That is your responsibility. And it's also your responsibility to teach the children in a loving and caring environment. That's also your responsibility. So that's your responsibilities. Other responsibilities is, of course, you read your study guides also, you need to come to work on time. You must not be these teachers who on the 20th when you get paid, you run away, you don't come to work, you stay away, you drink. When the money is finished after a week, you come back to work. So that's your responsibilities. Come to work, teach the children, prepare for your lessons, no corporal punishment, teach the children in a loving and caring environment, prepare for your work, and so on. And then, teachers' rights. What is the rights of teachers? Of course, you see. One right for the teachers, for example, is you have the right to belong to a trade union. You see, like, for example, many teachers, you see, like many teachers, they belongs to NANTU. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, as I said, teachers' rights, it's the right of the teacher, for example, to belong to a union, trade union, for example, like NANTU. And so that is one right of the teacher. And it's also the right of the teacher to engage in collective bargaining. Many teachers, for example, you see they are counselors of their political parties. So that is that freedom. That is the right that they are having. But you remember what I was saying in terms of responsibilities. Teacher also has the responsibility not to apply corporal punishment to the children, no to corporal punishment, and you have the responsibility to teach the children in a loving and caring environment. So the other rights are clearly spelled out in your textbook. So your study guide, you just need to read those things. Next. Yeah, so ladies and gentlemen, so those topics that I just mentioned now, if I can just recap and repeat them, are all questions on the basic knowledge kind of questions. And those kind of questions is between 2 marks, up to 10 marks, up to 20 marks, so on. If I can just repeat them, you have the notes. You should know what is a missionary. You should know what is capitalism, communism, you should know what is missionaries, and you should know what is this thing. How can I not forget this word now? When one country colonized, colonialism, you see, you should know what is colonialism, what is a missionary, how is history of education different from comparative education, what is meant with inclusive education. I try to make note. What we mean when we say the violation of educational rights of the child. Also, what is the structure of education of a country. Also, what is the goals of education after the country, after Namibia, for example, came up with new goals. I said to you it's 4, and you should know those 4 goals. And then I also said teachers' rights. But remember, teachers' rights, teachers also have responsibilities. And what is the right of the child? And I said to you, the right of the child is children must be taught in a loving and caring manner. If you look at the study guide, more and more examples are given. So those are the 70% questions. You just need to read them up, study hard around them, and also the philosophies of those particular gentlemen like Kenyatta, Nyerere, Bautzen-Gitters, Plato, and all those kind of guys. Yeah. Now we go to the second component of the examination paper. Remember I said this part counts 20% of the question paper, and this is high-level questions. In other words, here we want you to apply. We want you, do you understand the question? Do you understand? Do you understand? And can you apply what you have learned in a classroom situation? And where do you apply as a teacher? You apply in the classroom when you teach it. That is what is meant here with application. You apply it in the classroom where you are going to teach. Now, let's get some examples of this understanding and application kind of questions. Remember, I said it's 20% of the paper. The first one, children's rights in the context of teaching and learning. For example, children's rights The first one is, how will you apply it? If I can give you, how will you apply it? If I can give you an example, I would say to you that Remember the previous example that I gave you, I said you should teach in a loving and caring way. Right? Children's rights in the context of teaching and learning. You must teach in a loving, caring way. You will not beat the children. No beating of the children. Because because corporal punishment is prohibited. You must not do that. Right. So that is one application kind of question. The next point that I would like to make on that is when you violate that, when there's any violation, what can happen to you? Violation of the children's rights. Of the children's rights to education, you see. But when there's a violation, what can happen? As I said, the teacher can be you can lose your job. You can be disciplined, you see, when you violate that. So please read up on your study guide for more examples around that kind of one. So what can happen if you violate the rights of the children? Teachers' rights application. You remember I said the right to belong to a union. That is one right. The right to belong to a union. That is one right. And the responsibilities, remember I said, you need to be on time for your work, take your work serious, do not stay away from work, otherwise you can also be in problems with the bosses, you see. Right. And the next point that I would like to make is application of the philosophies studied in this course. Remember I talked about Kenyatta, Plato, Paulus and Gintes, Julius Nyerere, and so on. See what their theories are and see how that can be applied. For example, one of them says all children to be taught in the same way. One of these philosophies are saying that. All of them to be taught in the same way. One of them are saying that. So which one is that is saying that? So see what they are saying on their theories and how you will implement it. All right. And then planning to provide non-existing facilities such as IT facilities. You remember, okay, how will you apply that? Remember I talked about computers, so internet in the school. So computers, internet in the school. So how will you go about to provide those kind of things? Example, e.g., I can say, for example, e.g., maybe you will fundraise so that the school can fundraise to buy Fund raised to buy computers for the school. Fund raised to buy computers for the school because there is nothing. So that is one way to plan it. You see, things like that. Please also look at your notes and see how that can be that can be done. I spoke about the next point. I spoke about inclusive education and positive discipline. Now you remember when we talk about inclusive education, I basically said I give you an application already there. Is when you mainstream, when you integrate children with special needs into a normal classroom situation. But also with that application, you must just be careful because it must be not too a serious special need. So read your book and see what is happening there. Components of an education system, the practical example. I give you a practical example already. I said pre-primary, lower primary, upper primary, junior secondary, senior secondary, and I just give you homework. I said attach all the grades. Just attach the grades next to all the different phases, And the next one is, what is the influence of economic factors on education? And what is a practical understanding of that? Let me give you an example. If there is economic factors, on education, what is the effect of that on education? If there's unemployment in the country, high unemployment, people don't work, and that leads to poverty. When I am let's say the parent is unemployed, and because of that unemployment, there is poverty. The parent is poor, and the parent cannot buy. He cannot buy food for his family because of that poverty. He cannot buy food for his family, and because of that, maybe the children, and because there is no food, can't buy food. Let me say can't. He can't buy food. He cannot buy food for his children. And then because of that, there's no food at home. There is then school. There is then school drop out. The children drop out. So that is one example how one example of the economic factors has an impact on education. There's unemployment among the parents, and unemployment leads to poverty, and this particular parent cannot buy food for his children, and the children drop out of school. That is economic factors on education, and that is a practical example how that can affect education. So let's continue. And then the last part, ladies and gentlemen, is the 10% component. This is high-level thinking, critical analysis questions. 12 marks only. It's only one question. Because it's only 12 marks for all 3 papers. So, and that's why I was telling you the 70%, put all your effort there, lesser attention to the other 2 of the 10% and the 20%. Here, critical analysis says you must look at infrastructure in school. Let's use an example. Infrastructure in schools. Example, for example, I was talking about computers. That is part of infrastructure. you see, toilets, etc. You see. Some schools, the infrastructure is poor. There's no computers, there's no toilets, especially schools in the rural areas, you see. Schools in the rural areas. Schools in the rural areas. Maybe urban areas is fine. Windhoek, in all the other towns, Oshakati, in all these places. But if you go deep into the villages, you find the schools have no computers, no buildings, children have been taught under trees, etc. There's no boards for the teachers to write on and so on. That's what we mean with infrastructure. So how is the infrastructure in some schools? Is it good? If you say it's good, why do you say it's good? And if you say it's poor, why are you saying it's poor? Right? So it's things, why are you saying it's poor? So it's things like that. If it's good, why are you saying it's good? If it's poor, why are you saying it's poor? So that is what we mean with the first point of infrastructure in schools, a critical analysis. So think about many places in the country, how is it and so on. And then the other critical kind of question is, you remember earlier I talked about the 4 goals in education, and I said I will not give it to you, you must go and read them up. But the new philosophy of education after 1990 is about education for all. Now, as the word is saying, education for all means everybody. Black, white, girls, boys, everybody, education for all. Now here, a critical analysis question would say, how is it being? How is it being implemented? How is it being implemented? For example, is every child in school, right? Children of school going age. Example, let me say the son children. We know they don't go to school. But the philosophy of education says everybody must be in school, education for all. So what can we do about that? There are also not only son children, I'm just using that example, but there are others also. So how would you say, what is the state of implementation of education for all? Maybe are we there 80% for all the children? For all children? What about, or are we there 90% or are we there 100% for all children? So you need to think about that and so on and so on. Right. And the last one there with the high level critical thinking questions is the right of children and teachers. Okay. Rights of children, right? You remember what was the rights of children? You remember I said all children has the right to be in school. The right to be in school. I just spoke to you about the son children. The son children, who many of them are not in school. What does that mean? Does it mean we violate their right of these children, their right to education, right? Does it mean we violate their right to education? I'm just using an example of the San children. The Constitution says every child has the right to come to school, irrespective of origin, whether you are white, black, San, what. But now many San children, I'm sure even some of you also know about those kind of children. So what are we saying? Do we violate their rights and so on and so on? So that is a kind of critical analysis. You critique, you think high. And then the last one, rights of teachers. Right. The rights of teachers. How is it? How is it? Are all of them treated, are all teachers treated fairly? Are the teachers being treated fairly or not? Right. Are teachers being treated fairly? Are teachers being treated fairly or not? So you need to argue around that. So as I said, these are the high-level kind of questions. And that is that. So it's basically just 3 components there. Like I said to you, it's 12 questions, it's 12 marks only. Infrastructure in schools, how is it? Is it good? Why are you saying it's good? Let's think about facilities, especially in the rural areas, that is not so good, like computers, blackboards the teachers can write on, chairs for the children to can sit on, and so on. And then the second one, education for all. Remember I talked about, again, the San children. They are not in school, but we are saying education for all. Of course, there might be some cultural issues there. Some children don't want to go to school because maybe it's cultural factors that also play a role there. And the rights of children, I'm using again the right of the San children. The Constitution says every child has the right to be taught, must be in school. San children are not in school. Those kind of things, are we violating their rights and so on? Teachers' rights, are all the teachers being treated fairly and so on? So, ladies and gentlemen, that was the end of my presentation. I hope you have learned something. I would encourage you to study hard for the exams. Remember, I said, if you don't study, you will not make it. And I want to repeat, your efforts should be on the 70% basic knowledge type of questions. Focus there, because if you do well there, basically you can make it. The other 2 parts is only 30%. I'm not saying you should not look at it. That's why I went through the whole presentation with everything. What is in the second component, higher level, and what is also in the last level of the component, which is the high level, most high level critical analysis kind of questions. Thank you very much, and I want to wish you good luck, and I hope you will study hard, and I hope that you will pass, because you are paying. And now you see, if you don't study, then it's just as good as you have thrown money into the water. Thank you very much, and good luck, and all the best.